spoilers. In this episode we're going to find out, can the keep on the Borderlands survive an attack from the Caves of Chaos? I recently bought an FDM 3D printer, and one of my first big projects I printed was a castle with a curtain wall and a donjon. Part of my inspiration for the build was the original 1970s Dungeons & Dragons module, A Keep on the Borderlands. And as you can see, this is the final result. There is an iconic D-shaped tower, as well as a mixture of smaller and larger square and round towers. Now of course it's printed in 28mm, and so I had to keep the scale of the job down so I could fit it on a typical 6x4 table, but it's still a reasonable rendition of a keep. So I pulled out all my old role-playing miniatures and set up a game to see if the forces of good could withstand the assault from the forces of evil. The forces of good are commanded by the Castellan, who we've called Tom, the curate Miles, the bailiff Tony, and an acolyte John. Tom and Tony bring martial prowess, whilst Miles and John bring magic and faith. Together they lead a mixture of guard, who have crossbows and swords and an armoured and chainmail with a shield, the watch in leather armour and shield, some archers, some militia, and some peasants. Joining them are a ragtag bunch of adventurers, including 4 dwarves called Josh, Sean, Steve, and Dieter, 2 magic users who are Greg and Chow, and an elf, Brian. The dwarves all have chainmail and a mixture of hand-to-hand weapons, whilst Greg and Chow both have a sleep spell and Brian has a magic missile. The forces of evil are a bunch of humanoid tribes and undead. The plucky kobolds are joined by their pet giant rats. The numerous goblinoids include a tribe of goblins and hobgoblins, and they are joined by an ogre, and led by the hobgoblin chief. The orcs aren't so numerous, but they are vicious and hand-to-hand, and they are also led by their chief. The skeletons are led by an evil priest, Zack, and the zombies are led by another evil priest, Keith. Both Keith and Zack are heavily armoured and have a number of spells at their disposal. To play this battle, we'll be using the iconic red box basic D&D rules, but we'll overlay them with the AD&D Battle System Skirmishes rules, which effectively turns traditional D&D to a skirmish game and makes it a lot easier to manage. The forces of evil are randomly deployed, with the kobolds and orcs attacking the left wall, the goblins and hobgoblins the front wall, the ogre is deployed against the gatehouse, and Keith and Zack are leading their skeletons and zombies against the right wall. Against them, Steve, Dieter and Tony with some peasants are facing off against the orcs. Some militia and peasants will take on the kobolds. The goblins will be opposed by the militia. Josh and Sean will try to stop the hobgoblins, whilst John and Miles will stop the undead horde. The archers and men-at-arms are in the towers, as is Brian. Tom is the sole reserve, and he will try to stop the ogre should it break through the portcullises. The game starts off quite well for the defenders, with the evil attackers struggling to coordinate their attack. Whilst the ogre reaches the gate fairly quickly, it is heavily wounded by missile fire. Similarly, archery has started to take its toll on the goblin and undead hordes. And then magic starts to fly. Now I must admit that I'd kind of forgotten how deadly old school D&D really is, and magic quickly starts to make its presence felt in the game. It starts with Keith, who casts a hold person spell against Miles and his co-defenders on the wall. Miles needs a 12 to save, as he'll be held in place for 120 rounds. Yes, you heard me right, 120 rounds. And that of course will spell the end of the game for the cleric. Okay, so now let's just roll to see how many affected. It's 1, and then see if Miles can save. 3, he fails. Miles is arguably the most powerful character on the defender's side, and losing this great spellcaster will be a problem for him in the future. Zack follows this up by casting a light spell at John, and John also fails his save. In basic D&D, if you fail a save against a light spell, you can't attack, and therefore you're effectively eliminated from the game. With the death of Miles and John, the defenders start to whittle down the attackers with archery. Eventually the ogre falls, but it's not enough to stop the hordes reaching the walls. The monsters keep advancing, and as they get within range, the hobgoblins let loose a volley of their own. An arrow finds its mark, and Sean is taken down. The zombies are the first to reach the wall, and as they raise their ladders, the defenders brace themselves. A desperate battle breaks out on the battlement, with both Brian and the Watchman wounding a zombie. But the zombies are tough, each having 2 wounds, and as they keep coming, there is a sudden realisation that their innate resilience will mean that they'll be attacking back in the next round. And then the goblins and orcs reach the walls, raising their ladders and beginning their assaults. The zombies then attack, and Brian and the Watchman are both taken down by the undead. One of the heavily armoured guards and the remaining Watchman advances to take the fallen's place at the wall, but they both fail to hit. On the other wall there is better success against the orcs, with both Tony and Steve taking down an orc. The battle rages on with both sides taking casualties, but in the goblin sector a spectacular round of shooting and hand-to-hand sees 6 goblins killed in short order, and attrition is starting to wear down the attackers. The orcs still haven't gotten a foothold and are now down to just 8 troops. The goblins are down to 3 and the skeletons 8. Tom has taken a place on the wall and has cleaved one zombie after the other, and their numbers have dwindled to just 10 from 16. But in a flurry of blows, Dieter is killed by an orc and Josh is killed by a hobgoblin. Feeling that they are starting to lose momentum, Zach decides to bring some more magic to the table. He casts Hold Person against the remaining Watchmen fighting off his skeletons, but they both save. Tom is more than a match for the zombies, and so Keith decides to break the deadlock and cast Cause Fear. Tom may be good in hand-to-hand, but this is beyond him, and he runs. The zombies swarm up the now unopposed ladder as the battlements are now defended by only one guard. The guard withdraws to the door of the tower where he'll try to stem the tide and give his archers time to whittle down the undead. With their magic gone and their numbers dwindling, Keith, Zach and the orc and hobgoblin chiefs take to the walls. And then a breakthrough happens. The hobgoblin chief kills one of the guards. With only one guard remaining to hold that part of the wall, it's a high chance it'll be overrun. The guard retires to the relative safety of the gatehouse, but in doing so has left the wall wide open. The hobgoblins flood over the battlement, and one climbs the ladder to follow the guard, but the numbers are depleted and there are now only 5 left. The guard kills the first hobgoblin and then a second. Eventually the chieftain advances against him. Tony and Steve are in a desperate battle against the orc chieftain, and in the end Steve gets a telling blow, killing the chief and clearing the threat on that battlement. On the right hand wall, the remaining watchman pulls back from the skeletons to hold the now surrounded tower. Zack advances and maliciously kills the watchman, but a guard quickly takes his place. But the tower is surrounded, and Keith smashes the defender at the other entrance, and the zombies flood in. They surround and cut down the guard and climb to the top of the tower, which falls quickly as first one archer and then the other are killed by the 2 zombies. Up at the gatehouse, the guard kills the chief as the archers slay another hobgoblin. With only one attacker left, it looks like the gatehouse will be held. But there's fight left in the last hobgoblin, and he kills one archer, and then another, and then finally the remaining guard. In the courtyard, Tony, as the last remaining commander, has organised the remaining defenders into a defensive line. The undead, Keith and Zack, rush out to meet them. 2 of the defenders are cut down in the initial charge, but in return 2 skeletons are cut down. Up until now, Greg and Chow have held their magic back, waiting for the right moment, and now they sense the time is right. They both unleash sleep spells against Keith and Zack, and with careful positioning they are able to target their opponents without affecting any of the defenders. The spells are powerfully cast, and both spells will affect both the evil clerics, meaning that they'll need to save twice. But neither do, and both fall asleep, and Steve and Tony fall upon them and deliver a coup de grace. The undead fight on. They kill the remaining militia whilst Greg and Chow team up to cut down a skeleton. But it's down to the wire, and Steve is the next to fall from an unholy skeleton attack. Chow fails to block a blow and is the next slain. It's deadly hand to hand with no quarter given as Greg gets revenge and kills the last remaining skeleton. The remaining hobgoblin joins the fray, and Greg and the guard are cut down. Only Tony survives in the courtyard, and his only support is an archer and a guard in one of the towers, who up until now have just finished off the kobolds. But as they rush in, Tony kills a zombie. The remaining zombie and hobgoblin flail away at the bailiff, but they can't hit him, and support soon arrives. Tony cuts down the hobgoblin, and now there is only the zombie left, which eventually is surrounded and killed. And so the defenders are victorious, but what a pyrrhic victory it is. As they bury the dead, they realise that they've lost 41 out of their original 44, whilst the attackers have lost 126. So perhaps it's true, and you do need more than 3 to 1 odds to win a battle against a well-entrenched defender.